Amy, I am so excited. Welcome to the Dr. Tom Show. Today is going to be a really special episode. I've been pretty excited to get you on ever since I met you on a webinar about a week ago. You are the creator of Mama Kind and Mind Kind, and what I love about what you do is it takes these principles, which we know are extraordinary for improving someone's experience and expression of life, yet you put them in a way that anybody can take them on. So Amy, welcome to the show. I'm super excited to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me.
So what I think is really great, and what I'd love our audience to hear straight away from the start, is that you are not just, but you are a regular mum. You've got a great job, you've got a great career, but you've also created this other thing which is really helping people live their lives. So just give us some context on who the real Amy is. I've heard your intro from the top of the show, but who's the real Amy?
Sure. So I actually started my Instagram as Positive Polly. Polly is my nickname given to me by my dad. He rarely calls me Amy. And I started with that, oh gosh, it was before I had the baby, so it must be getting on for 2 or 3 years now. And it was sort of a very positive space. I just felt like I needed something to this outlet to share my positivity, the things that I'd learned, because I've been practicing mindfulness and meditation myself. And it sort of started with little quotes. So I'd share a lot of quotes that I'd write myself. And it just grew and grew and grew from there. And I think really I like to use that space to show everybody that, like you say, I'm just regular sort of person and I practice mindfulness and meditation. And I just want to make it accessible for people, because I still think there's a little bit of a misconception that it's a bit too woo-woo and not, you have to be a certain type of person to practice it. And I know that it's gradually moving away from that, but I still think there's a lot of people who feel that. And I just want to help people go on that journey to realise that here I am, cleaning up a nappy, but I can still do it mindfully, or, I'm having a stressful day at work, but I can still practice mindfulness. I like to shop, I like to, all that sort of stuff. You don't have to be sitting cross-legged on the floor with no belongings and being quiet and zen all the time. You can just be you.
I love that, and it's something that I've tried to say, and I love how you get it across, because I really do believe that there are a couple of fundamentals to health, and one of the main pillars is this mindfulness. I like to call it mindlessness, and we'll talk a little bit about what mindfulness really is. And if we can get anyone to do it in any situation, what a great place we would live in. So for someone who has heard, because everybody's heard the term meditation, maybe they've not quite heard the term mindfulness. Just explain what you mean by mindfulness or meditation and as a practice of it.
So the definition of mindfulness is paying attention to the moment without judgment. And that's just a load of words if you don't know sort of what it means. But the best way for me to explain it, and this is how I explain it on my courses or when I'm doing mindfulness sessions, is that we live very much on autopilot. We live quite often in the past and we live quite often in the future. And we very rarely live in the moment. And you will be thinking to yourself, listening to this, of course I live in the moment. But when you actually think about it, you don't, because a lot of the time, whatever task you're doing, whatever task in hand, you're not actually paying attention to it. We do so much on autopilot. And actually, we don't often pay attention to the people in our lives because we're so distracted by technology, our to-do list, the things we should, would, or could have done. And it's sort of an epidemic that we aren't living in the moment. And there's a lot of research now to show that living in the moment, practicing mindfulness, and exercising your brain in that way can create new pathways to allow you to help with that fight or flight response. And that then helps you to live a calmer and with more clarity. Does that make sense?
Makes it whole sense. I mean, there is only one thing that exists, and that is this moment, this moment right now. And if we're thinking into the future or thinking into the past, it's normally an anxious thought about what's to come, or I wish I hadn't done it that way. And when you talk about the stress response, that puts us in a response, which is a pro-disease state, a pro-sickness state. So it is so important. I love how you said, I love the definition. I've never actually heard it. Pay attention to the moment without judgment.
Mm.
Now, we are recording this during this, I hate the word crisis, but during this COVID crisis. I have seen extraordinary amounts of judgment in society at the moment. And, but paralleled with, I've seen a lot of great, kind, and beautiful acts at the same time. With everything that's going on, it's hard not to judge the neighbor who's gone out twice in a day, you know, the person who's still going to work, why are they still going to work, why am I off work, the person who's got their job when I lost mine. How can we begin to think about removing judgment with so much scatter in our mind and in the news?
So the way that I like to sort of reframe that word judgment is usually with kindness, because judgment is a bit of a big word and it sounds a bit negative. So I like to think about it as kindness. And what I say is you have to start with you. So we're talking about judging our neighbours or being unkind to our neighbours. But actually part of the reason we do that is because we find that easy, because in a way we do it to ourselves, and we do it to ourselves first, and we do it to ourselves the most. You're nodding your head, you're like,
You're
yes.
speaking my language, please, come on.
And what I say to, I have a group of mums that I work with, and I say to them, you have to be kind to yourself first. This whole thing around not giving from an empty cup doesn't just mean self-care. It also means kindness. You have to be kind to yourself. You feel guilt, you're judging yourself, you're being hard on yourself, you're your own worst critic. And we have to remove that, because we can't give to other people, kindness that we're not giving to ourselves. And a little practice I ask them to do is to place their hand on their heart. And sometimes that invokes some emotion and they can feel quite upset. And the reason they feel upset is because they just don't give themselves that kindness very often. And they feel sad because they're not doing that for themselves. So I ask them to do that, and we start to do that more often. And I ask them to be kind to themselves. Give yourself a break. Don't judge yourself all of the time. Don't be so hard on yourself. You wouldn't talk to your best friend that way, so don't do it to yourself.
It's very, very true. And I've seen these, events where they've taken someone and told them to go and tell their children that they don't like them, that they think they're ugly, that they don't respect the decisions they make. And of course, the person's like, well, I would never say that to my kid. And the obvious is, and I can see you nodding your head now. It's like, well, why do you do that to yourself?
Mm.
And it's so, so important. I love how you just took that judgment statement and you said, stop thinking about judgment, think about it as kindness. And if we can be kind to ourselves first, what a great position to move forward to. So when do you think people should be really practicing this? When do you think the best time is for us to, do this mindful? How can we start to integrate it? So speak to the mother who's caught up in such a stressful situation. She's now got the kids at home. She doesn't have to take them to school. She literally got them at home all day. Got a text from a patient today. She said she used to feel like someone who just fed people meals in the evenings. She now feels like she's running a full-on hotel with all the different services because everyone's there all the time. So how can someone start with that? But also, I'd like you to talk to the businessman who, as soon as you say the word mindfulness, just goes, speak to them as well. Where can we start?
Can I just say that I have run some sessions for different people via service. I did one with the police this week, obviously virtually, but other things I've done in real life. And you would be surprised at the male participants that will come up to me at the end and say, oh my God, I was actually all right. It's like, yeah, it is all right. So yeah, just give it a try. But what I'd say is it would be the same to anyone that I'm speaking to, because both of those people you've mentioned have now got a very full-on life and their landscape has just changed, and things are very different and things are somewhat out of our control. But I would say the main thing is, for me, I like to call it mindful living. So when we talk about those things that we do on autopilot, brushing our teeth, grabbing our phone in the morning, having our cup of tea, eating our lunch, all the way throughout our day, we do so many things on autopilot. And what I would say is mindfulness is about bringing ourselves to those tasks fully So using as many senses as possible, and anyone can do that, even the mum who is snowed under. When you're hanging the washing out, or when you're cooking the dinner, to the businessman who's been on his laptop all day, whatever it is, he's got to walk to the toilet at some point, he's got to make himself a drink. Those tasks can be mindful. It doesn't have to be this big fancy event. It doesn't have to be this big fancy meditation. You can start to incorporate it. So, for example, if you are making a cup of tea, just make that your mini mindful event. Focus on the sound of the kettle boiling, the sound of the water going in the cup, the smell of the tea. Focus on as many senses as possible. The look of the milk going into the water. Each of those senses, just take them, just bring your attention, and your mind will wander. That's okay. That's absolutely normal. You're a human being. If you can focus as much attention as possible on that task, that is mindfulness. You are in that moment, in the now, and that helps to rewire your brain.
Love that. And I love what you said, that it's normal for the thought to come. So what I've heard before is that if the thought comes, the wrong practice would be to try and force the thought away. The right practice would be to receive, accept, and pass on. What's your take on that?
Sure. So we don't say right or wrong, because there is no right or wrong in
I love
mindfulness.
this.
But yeah, so basically what you want to do is you want to be accepting of the fact that you think. It's okay, you do have thoughts, but the more you practice, the easier it becomes to allow them to pass, and to stop engaging with them so much. And a good thing to do is you can say to yourself, when, say, you're in a meditation or you're doing a mindful task and you have a thought and you notice, you can say to yourself, oh, that was a thought, because by labeling it, you're accepting it, you're noticing it, but you are letting it go, because you know that thoughts, they come and go and they're not permanent. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. I think it's brilliant. Why is there no right or wrong?
Because we don't want to judge ourselves. Doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't whatever you do, as long as you are taking that time to practice, you can't be wrong. Your brain's ticking away.
It is. You've blown my mind, because it's something that I practice, but obviously not as good as I could. And I suppose it's something that I can always learn. Can kids do mindfulness?
Yeah, I actually wrote a journal for children. It just happened as part of someone coming up with this idea that they wanted for their daughter, and the stars aligned and it all happened. And I've written this journal because there's actually businesses out there that do provide mindfulness in schools, which is just amazing. And also, just it's a good thing to practice with your children from an early age, because anxiety is an epidemic, really, isn't it? And children are dealing with that from a younger and younger age. That technology is available to a younger and younger age, and the world just the way it is at the moment, a lot more children struggle with stress and anxiety. So absolutely, you can start that from a young age, and it could be fun. It's part of a game. One of the activities in my mindfulness journal is balancing on one foot, that you can do together, and they don't even need to know that's mindfulness, but it really brings the attention to their body. They're doing something fun, but it is mindfulness, because they're in this moment and they're focusing on their body.
What a brilliant idea. And I love that. I love the fact you talked about the anxiety as well, the way the world is going. And it just brought up really interestingly, straight onto that thought of thou shalt not judge. But then that's already saying you should not judge, which is that negative connotation, which is therefore not receiving the thought and therefore never really overcoming that. So again, it comes back to that, well, let's start with kindness perspective, which I think is absolutely brilliant. Fantastic. The light's gone on. For everyone who's not on the YouTube channel and can't see the fact that Polly just disappeared underneath the desk to turn the light on, she's back.
I thought I was being really subtle.
Good job, half of this is on audio. I didn't describe what was going on because it was undescribable.
I thought you'd just pretend that it didn't happen.
That's fine. I was being present in the moment, observing what was going on before my eyes. So thank you. So what do you see as the potential? What do you see as the potential for communities because I really believe healing happens and works within communities. So mindfulness is a practice you can do on your own and very insular with. But how can that then have ramifications for a wider group of community and health consciousness?
So I guess, well, I mean, if you start with your own community, like in your household, um, you know, you start with yourself, and then naturally, you know, children see you doing it, your partner sees you doing it. You know, my mum saw me doing it, and she started to ask, because she's been through a bit of a tough time. You know, she took up yoga, which is a type of mindfulness. You know, mindfulness can be running, it can be
Yeah.
exercise. It's not just sitting still or having a cup of tea. It can be anything that brings you to that moment. That's why some people, you know, love exercise, because that is mindfulness for them. So yeah, I guess it starts to spread, doesn't it? And you create the community immediately around you first. And it helped my mum so greatly. I'm so glad that I was able to share that. And then moving on to my workplace, you know, people have to listen to me banging on about it all the time, and gradually it starts to seep into their consciousness, and they start to notice it if they see it in the news, or they see things pop through and they email me it and say, "Oh, Amy, this made me think of you," or they'll ask me questions. And it's just that gradual, isn't it, like seeping out of information. And you know, you don't need to force this down anyone's throat, but as they start to experience it and they start to watch you experience it, people get interested and intrigued. And then I guess that just starts to filter out. And you know, I think for the wider consciousness of the world, I just think we live in such a fast-paced environment. You know, I think probably a lot of people have realized in this current situation that we're in, how fast we actually were going, because we have not slowed down like this for a very, very long time. So I think for the wider consciousness, I just want people to just enjoy their life and just be in the now, because like you say, it's all we have got. And we need something, you know, this comes, it's 2000 years old, meditation, mindfulness. One of my teachers is an ex-Buddhist monk, so it's not something new. We've just sort of forgotten our way a bit. And I was going to say earlier, and I forgot to say, I like to think of mindfulness and swapping the word mindfulness for awareness, because everybody knows what awareness means. So
Mm.
if you swap that word and you think about awareness, when are you not being aware? You know when you're not being aware, but you can't switch it off. Do you see what I mean? If you're not being aware of this moment, but you are always aware, because you can't stop being aware of the chair you're sitting in, can you? So it's not like another thing to do. You're always aware, but it's what are you being aware of? We're so distracted. You can't turn it off, but you're not putting it on the right thing sometimes. So if you think about mindfulness as awareness, it helps you. It helps you to think about that in a more realistic way.
And the time is now. Talks that I've done with people, and one of the things I reference is 30,000. 30,000 is the amount of days the average person has on this planet. 30,000. It's not many. And then when we take this, you know, the industry, the sector you're in, with the police and the fire service, near 27,000.
Mm,
And then there's people you're speaking to have already lived a proportion of that. So how many have you got left?
yeah.
And you can either just let that time go by, or you can really enjoy and experience every single moment that we have. And I think that what you're doing is enabling people to do that. And I'm just so pleased that there is someone out there like yourself who is not just preaching it, but actually bridging the gap between where people are and where they could be in terms of, you know, mums and busy business.
Let me just tell you something about myself as well. I was speaking at an event in London, and my mum came, bless her, she's like my number one fan. You know, I said when I was giving that talk, I'm a fast talker. I'm always on the go. You know, growing up, I'd eat my dinner and then I'd be dancing around the room or going here, there, and everywhere. And she'd be saying to me, "Amy, can you just sit down for a minute? You just had your dinner," or you know, when I was young. And even now, she's like, "Well, where are you going this evening? So what? You need to have a break." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine, I'm fine." And so, you know, me naturally, I'm naturally like that. Like, I'm not probably a naturally mindful person. I've taught myself, you know, and I strive for things. I love having a goal. I love, you know, doing new stuff, meeting new people. But all that takes us away from the moment, constantly striving. You know, it's brilliant to have goals. We should have goals. But when you're always chasing, you are very rarely living in the moment. And I am an example of that, because I am not naturally, you know, a take it slow kind of be here now person. And I've taught myself, and, you know, it's just had such an amazing effect on the way I react to things and respond to things and appreciate things.
I love that. I heard Ed Milet came up with this term, I think, and I love it. Blissfully dissatisfied,
Hmm,
in the sense that we are dissatisfied to the point where we know we can achieve more, want to achieve more, but we are very blissful in the moment that we have and enjoy that moment. And I think that's a beautiful place if we can get to that, because I think the definition of fulfillment is growth, but we've got to enjoy that growth process. Otherwise, we're perpetually chasing, chasing rainbows.
exactly.
Amy, your content is fabulous. Now, if people want to find out more about you, and you are available to mums and businesses and pretty much anybody, uh, which I just think is extraordinary. And I'm definitely going to get you to come and work and share with some of my groups, which I think would be brilliant. So thank you in advance for that, by the way. I've just asked you. If someone wants to get hold of you, if someone wants to find out more about what you do, where can they reach you best?
So probably if you're a mum, my Instagram is this is Mama Kind, just two M's, Mama, in Mama Kind, and my more corporate mindfulness Instagram is this is Mind Kind.
I love that, and we'll obviously put those links in the show notes.
Thank you.
Is there any final amazing words of wisdom you'd like to leave for our audience?
Yes, if that's okay. Actually, I've got a thought in my head that, you know, in these current times, you know, I talk about mindfulness and meditation and how that can help. And, you know, perhaps people who haven't practiced it, I would just encourage you to just, I don't know, go to YouTube, find something that you like, or, you know, or give me a shout, you know, come and find out a bit more. But basically, your feelings are valid. Okay, mindfulness teaches us about this non-judgment and this kindness. And I just want people to know at this time that whatever they're feeling is valid, because we sometimes think that we're not allowed to be sad or angry because someone's got it worse than us, but we don't tell ourselves that we can't be happy because someone's happier than us. And I think it's really important to know that whatever you're thinking and whatever you're feeling is valid. It's just about how we manage that. So if you feel sad about the situation or angry or anxious, that's absolutely okay. But I just encourage you to sit with it and just ask yourself whether you can control it or change it. And if you can't, try to let it go. That's what I've been doing, asking myself how I feel. If I can't change it, if I can't control it, I'm letting it go. And then I focus on the nice things that maybe I can control. What time I have my lunch, what I have for lunch, where I go for my walk. I just want people to know that, you know, we're all human, and, you know, everything they feel is valid. But we can help ourselves. So just try to be kind to yourself, try to help yourself. And yeah, just you're doing your best, and everyone, I think, is just amazing.
Wow, Amy, I've been blown away by some of the stuff you said, and I really, really appreciate that. It comes
Thank
right
you.
back around to what you said at the start. Like, let's start using different words, and let's start with kindness. So, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being on the show. You're a blessing to everyone you serve, but also I think to humanity. The ripple effects are huge. So, thank you very much for joining us on the Dr. Tom Show. I really appreciate
Thank you so, so much for having me. You're so lovely.
it. My pleasure.